In the glittering ballrooms of London, where every smile hides a knife and every whisper can destroy a reputation, one woman made a choice that shocked the entire aristocracy. Lady Adriana Vale, Duchess of Ashbourne, had endured 3 years of polite indifference from the husband she loved. 3 years of sleeping in separate rooms, of perfect manners hiding perfect emptiness. But on one fateful morning, the Duchess everyone pitied simply vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, just 8 words that would bring a powerful duke to his knees. Perhaps love grows best in absence. Stay until the end to see how this shattered marriage became the greatest love story London had ever witnessed. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The Harrington Ball of 1815 would be remembered for many things, but in the private thoughts of Lady Adriana Vale, Duchess of Ashbourne, it would forever mark the night she stopped lying to herself. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light catching on crystal chandeliers and silk gowns, transforming London's elite into a sea of glittering jewels and careful smiles. The orchestra played a waltz that seemed designed to make everything appear more romantic than it truly was. Couples swept across the marble floor and practiced synchronization, their movements as rehearsed as their conversations, as false as their declarations of friendship. Adriana stood near the terrace doors, a vision in midnight blue silk that had cost more than most families earned in a year. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style that had taken her lady's maid 2 hours to perfect. Sapphires, her husband's family heirlooms, circled her throat like a beautiful collar. She looked every inch the Duchess she had become 3 years ago. She felt like a ghost. "The Duchess appears radiant this evening," a voice nearby commented, not quite soft enough to avoid Adriana's hearing. Lady Pemberton, a woman whose hobby was other people's misery, smiled behind her fan. Though one might wonder what she has to smile about, poor dear. 3 years, her companion, Mrs. Hastings, replied with false sympathy dripping from every word. 3 years of marriage and still no heir. My grandmother always said a cold husband produces a barren wife. One can hardly blame the Duke for his restraint. After all, she brought nothing to the marriage but a pretty face and a minor title. His mother must be beside herself. Adriana's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her champagne flute. She had learned long ago not to react, not to give them the satisfaction of knowing their barbs landed true. Instead, she kept her expression serene, her posture perfect, her mask firmly in place, because that's what survival in this world required. Masks upon masks upon masks. Across the ballroom, she could see him. Nathaniel Hawthorne, Duke of Ashbourne, stood in a circle of admirers, powerful men who sought his political influence, ambitious mothers who wished their daughters had caught his eye instead, and sycophants who laughed at his every measured word. At 32, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that drew every eye. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that he wore slightly longer than fashion dictated and eyes the color of storm clouds, he looked like the romantic hero from one of the novels Adriana secretly devoured in her lonely chambers. But Nathaniel Hawthorne was no hero. He was a stranger who happened to share her name. As if sensing her gaze, his eyes met hers across the crowded room. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in their depths. Then it was gone, replaced by the same polite acknowledgement he might give any acquaintance. He nodded slightly. She returned the gesture with equal coolness. 3 years of marriage, and they had perfected the art of appearing together while remaining utterly separate. "Duchess," a warm voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Lord Marcus Fairfax appeared at her elbow, his boyish grin a welcome contrast to the calculating stares surrounding them. "You look as though you could use rescue from whatever tedious conversation is surely about to trap you." Despite everything, Adriana felt her lips curve into a genuine smile. Marcus had been a friend since childhood, one of the few people in London who seemed to see her as something other than a title or a failure. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to those who know you." He offered his arm. "Dance with me? I promise to step on your feet no more than twice, which I believe is an improvement over last season." "3 times, actually," she corrected, placing her hand on his sleeve. "But who's counting?" As they moved toward the dance floor, Adriana caught sight of Nathaniel's expression. Something hardened in his features. Disapproval, perhaps, though he had no right to it. He had surrendered any claim to her attention the day he relegated her to the lonely wing of Ashbourne Manor. The waltz began, and Marcus proved true to his word, managing the steps with only minor disasters. But his easy conversation was exactly what Adriana needed. "You know," he said quietly as they turned, "you don't have to pretend with me. I've known you since you were 8 years old and pushed me into the pond at your father's estate. You deserved it. You said girls couldn't climb trees. And you proceeded to climb higher than any boy dared, then refused to come down for 3 hours." His smile faded slightly. That girl had fire in her. Where did she go, Adriana? The question struck deeper than he probably intended. Where had that girl gone? The one who climbed trees and argued philosophy with her tutors and dreamed of a marriage built on partnership and passion? She had died slowly over 3 years of perfect, suffocating politeness. "She grew up," Adriana said softly. "She learned that fairy tales end at the altar, not begin there." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Hawthorne is a fool. He is a duke. There's a difference." "Is there?" Before she could respond, Marcus continued, his voice urgent. "You could leave, you know. Come stay with your Aunt Beatrice in the countryside. She writes to you constantly, begging you to visit. And confirm every terrible thing the Tun says about me? That I'm an inadequate wife who abandoned her duties?" Adriana shook her head. "I made vows, Marcus. I may be many things, but I am not a quitter. Even when staying is killing you?" The music swelled, preventing her response, but the question echoed in her mind long after the dance ended. Even when staying is killing you? She didn't have an answer. Not yet. The carriage ride home was, as always, exquisitely uncomfortable. Nathaniel sat across from her in the plush interior, his long legs taking up more space than seemed fair, his attention focused on the passing street lamps rather than his wife. The silence between them had weight and texture, accumulated over 1,000 similar journeys. "You seem to enjoy your conversation with Fairfax," he said finally, his tone carefully neutral. Adriana looked at him, searching for accusation or jealousy or anything that might indicate he cared. She found nothing but aristocratic politeness. "Lord Fairfax is an old friend." "So it appears." "Is that a problem, Your Grace?" The formal address made him flinch, though he tried to hide it. "I merely observed that I smiled?" Adriana heard the edge creeping into her voice, but couldn't stop it. 3 years of swallowed words suddenly pressed against her throat, demanding release. "That for 5 minutes I appeared happy? Forgive me if I forgot my role as your perpetually melancholy accessory." "Adriana, don't." She held up a hand, exhausted. "Don't pretend this conversation matters. We'll arrive home, retreat to our separate wings, and tomorrow we'll perform the same elegant dance we've perfected. Nothing changes. Nothing ever changes." Nathaniel's jaw worked as if he wanted to speak, but whatever words he might have said died unspoken. Instead, he turned back to the window, and Adriana turned to hers, and they completed the journey in a silence more eloquent than any argument. Ashbourne Manor rose before them like a monument to everything beautiful and empty. Its limestone facade glowed in the moonlight, dozens of windows reflecting the night sky. Servants had lit lamps along the drive, creating a pathway of light that should have felt welcoming, but instead felt like a trail leading to a very elegant prison. Inside, the head housekeeper, Mrs. Morrison, waited with her usual efficiency. "Your Grace, Your Grace." She nodded to each of them in turn. "I've had warming pans placed in both chambers. Shall I have tea sent up?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Morrison," Adriana said softly. "I'll retire directly." "As you wish, Your Grace." The older woman's eyes held something like sympathy, which somehow made everything worse. Adriana climbed the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the polished mahogany banister, her footsteps echoing in the vast entrance hall. Behind her, she could hear Nathaniel's heavier tread as he headed toward his study. Of course. It was barely midnight. He would spend another few hours with his ledgers and correspondence, avoiding his empty bedroom as studiously as he avoided his wife. Her chambers occupied the east wing, beautiful rooms decorated in shades of cream and gold that had been chosen by Nathaniel's mother before the wedding. Adriana had changed nothing, as if by leaving them untouched she could prove she was merely a temporary guest in this life. Her lady's maid, Sarah, waited to help her undress, but Adriana waved her away. "I can manage tonight. Get some rest." "Are you certain, Your Grace? It won't take but a moment. Please, Sarah, I just need to be alone." The girl bobbed a curtsy and disappeared, leaving Adriana surrounded by luxury and loneliness. She removed the sapphires herself, placing them carefully in their velvet case. Tomorrow, they would be returned to the vault, where they waited like patient prisoners until the next social obligation demanded their appearance. She unpinned her hair, letting it fall in dark waves past her shoulders. Removed the elegant gown and the constraining corset beneath it, put on her plainest nightdress, and wrapped herself in a shawl that had belonged to her mother. Then she sat at her writing desk and stared at the blank page before her. This was her ritual. Every night she told herself she would write something, a letter to Aunt Beatrice perhaps, or an entry in her journal. But the words never came. How could she explain a loneliness so profound it had become her only constant companion? How could she describe the specific torture of being married to a man who looked at her with perfect courtesy and absolutely no warmth? Outside her window, London slept. Inside her heart, something was breaking. Or perhaps it had broken long ago, and she was only now noticing the pieces. The pattern continued through autumn and into winter. Breakfast together in strained silence. Afternoons spent on separate pursuits. Nathaniel with his parliamentary duties, Adriana with her charitable work. Evenings at social events where they played the role of the perfect aristocratic couple with Oscar-worthy performances. But Adriana had discovered something that made the emptiness slightly more bearable: purpose. Unable to find meaning in her marriage, she had begun pouring herself into the people who depended on Ashbourne estates, the tenant farmers and their families, the village school that desperately needed funding, the families struggling through harsh winters and failed harvests. She rode out almost daily, her horse carrying her across the sprawling lands that technically belonged to her husband, but that she had claimed as her own kingdom. Here, among people who called her Your Grace with genuine respect rather than veiled mockery, she could almost forget the hollow ache in her chest. "The roof is holding, Your Grace," old Thomas Brennan told her one crisp December morning, gesturing to his cottage. "Thanks to the repairs you authorized. My wife and I can't thank you enough." "The estate should have addressed it months ago," Adriana replied, making a note in the small leather journal she carried. "Have there been other neglected repairs?" Thomas hesitated, his weathered face uncertain. "Well, the Widow Patterson's chimney is crumbling, and the Northfield drainage is still flooding come heavy rain. I'll see to it," she wrote quickly, her mind already calculating costs and logistics. "Anything else?" "Your Grace is too kind." The old man's eyes were suspiciously bright. "The previous Duchess, we never expected—" Adriana understood what he couldn't quite say. Nathaniel's mother had viewed the tenants as resources to be managed, not people to be cared for. And Nathaniel himself, for all his political brilliance, seemed to view his estates as numbers in a ledger rather than communities of living, breathing human beings. But where her husband saw obligations, Adriana found purpose. She spent her afternoons visiting families, listening to concerns, solving problems both large and small. She established a small fund for emergency medical care. She hired a teacher for the village school and supplemented her salary from her own allowance. She organized a lending library and a community garden. The work filled her days, and if it couldn't fill the emptiness in her heart, at least it gave her a reason to rise each morning. Mrs. Morrison watched these activities with thinly veiled approval. One afternoon, as Adriana returned from another visit to the village, the housekeeper met her in the entrance hall. "Your Grace, a moment?" "Of course, Mrs. Morrison." The older woman glanced around, ensuring privacy. "I wanted you to know, the staff, we see what you're doing. For the tenants, for the village. It's more than duty, Your Grace. It's kindness, and we appreciate it. Even if—" She trailed off, but Adriana understood. "Even if the Duke doesn't notice." "Thank you," Adriana said quietly. "That means more than you know." The turning point came on a February evening, at yet another ball, this time hosted by the Cunninghams, whose daughter was being presented to society. Adriana wore green silk that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. She had taken extra care with her appearance tonight, though she couldn't have said why. Some stubborn part of her heart still hoped that perhaps this time, Nathaniel might look at her with something other than polite indifference. She found him in the card room, surrounded by his usual circle of political allies. Lord Ashford was holding forth on some parliamentary matter, his voice carrying across the room. And that's why the new agricultural subsidies are essential, Hawthorne. The working classes must be properly managed, or we'll have another uprising on our hands. Managed? The word escaped Adriana's lips before she could stop it. The conversation died. Every head turned toward her. Nathaniel's expression shifted to something like alarm. "Your Grace," Lord Ashford said with thinly veiled condescension, "I didn't realize you took an interest in political matters." Adriana knew she should smile, curtsy, retreat. That was the expected role. But 3 years of swallowing her opinions had left her choking on silence. "I take an interest in people, Lord Ashford, and describing human beings who work the land that produces your wealth as subjects to be managed, rather than citizens to be supported, seems not only morally questionable, but strategically foolish." The room had gone utterly quiet. Nathaniel stood frozen, his face unreadable. Lord Ashford's expression darkened. "My dear Duchess, I hardly think you understand the complexities. I understand that tenant farmers in Yorkshire are struggling because drainage systems have been neglected for decades. I understand that children in rural communities have no access to education, limiting their ability to improve their circumstances. I understand that when you view people as problems to be managed, rather than as the foundation of our economy, everyone suffers, including you, Lord Ashford, when those managed workers can no longer produce the crops that fund your lifestyle." The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Then Nathaniel's friend, Lord Pembroke, laughed. "By God, Hawthorne, your wife has more political instinct than half of Parliament. Where has she been hiding this sharp tongue?" "In rooms where men actually listen to her, apparently," Adriana said sweetly. That broke the tension. Several men chuckled, though Lord Ashford looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Nathaniel's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or was it pride? "If you'll excuse me, gentlemen," Adriana said, "I believe I've monopolized enough of your important discussion." She left before anyone could respond, her heart pounding. What had she been thinking? She'd just embarrassed her husband in front of his political allies, violated every rule about proper feminine behavior, and probably confirmed every criticism the ton leveled at her. But as she stood on the terrace, gulping cold night air, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Alive. That was quite a performance. Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. Adriana turned slowly, expecting anger. Instead, his expression was complicated, difficult to read. "I apologize if I embarrassed you," she said, though she didn't quite manage to sound sorry. "Did you mean it? What you said about the tenants?" "Every word." He stepped closer, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "How do you know about the Yorkshire drainage problems?" "I read the estate reports, all of them, not just the summaries your steward prepares." She lifted her chin, defensive. "I may be a useless duchess by society's standards, but I'm not ignorant of the properties that bear my name." "I never said you were useless. You never said much of anything to me at all." The words hung between them, sharp with 3 years of unspoken hurt. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment Adriana thought he might actually respond, might finally break through the wall of polite distance he'd maintained since their wedding night. Instead, he said, "We should return to the ball. People will talk." "Of course, people will talk, the only thing that ever mattered." "You go ahead, Your Grace," Adriana said, exhausted. "I find I'm not feeling well. I'll call for the carriage." She left him standing there and didn't look back. The incident at the Cunningham ball changed something, though Adriana couldn't quite define what. Nathaniel seemed to watch her more closely now, as if trying to solve a puzzle he'd never noticed before. Sometimes she caught him staring during their silent breakfasts, his expression thoughtful. But still, he said nothing, did nothing. The distance between them remained as vast as ever. Until the morning, everything shattered. It was March, and spring was trying to push through winter's stubborn grip. Adriana had spent the previous day in the village, helping organize a community celebration for the planting season. She'd arrived home late, exhausted and happy in a way that had nothing to do with her marriage. She'd also made a decision. She couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't continue sleepwalking through a life that brought her no joy. Couldn't keep hoping that Nathaniel would suddenly transform into the husband she needed. Couldn't keep sacrificing herself on the altar of social expectations and marital duty. She needed to leave. Not forever, perhaps, but she needed space, distance. She needed to remember who she was beyond the title of Duchess. So in the dark hours before dawn, while Ashbourne Manor slept, Adriana packed a small bag. She took only what she could carry: a few dresses, her mother's shawl, her journal, and the small amount of money she'd saved from her allowance. She left the sapphires, the elaborate gowns, the trappings of wealth and status. She left everything except her dignity. And on Nathaniel's desk, where he would find it when he began his morning routine, she left a note written in her careful hand. Your Grace, for 3 years I have tried to be the wife you needed. I have been patient, silent, obedient, perfect, but I have also been invisible. I do not blame you for the coldness between us. Marriage was a contract for you, a political alliance. I understand that now. What I failed to understand was that I deserved more than existence as a beautiful ornament in your elegant home. I am leaving for a time, not to punish you, but to save myself. I have spent 3 years disappearing piece by piece, and I fear if I stay any longer, there will be nothing left of the woman I once was. Perhaps love grows best in absence, or perhaps this distance will prove what I have long suspected, that we were never meant to be more than strangers sharing a name. Either way, I must discover who I am beyond your shadow. Do not look for me. I will return when I am ready, or I will not return at all. Yours in name, Adriana. She left the note propped against his inkwell, where the morning light would illuminate it. Then she slipped through the manor's corridors like a ghost, avoiding servants, avoiding witnesses, avoiding anything that might trap her in this beautiful prison for another day. The kitchen door opened silently under her hand. The stable was dark and quiet, but she had prepared for this. Her horse, Mercy, waited where she'd asked the stable boy to have her ready, though the boy himself was nowhere to be seen. Good. Fewer questions, fewer complications. Adriana led Mercy out into the pre-dawn darkness, her breath misting in the cold air. Behind her, Ashbourne Manor stood silent and imposing, its windows dark, its inhabitants sleeping. Somewhere in that vast building, her husband slept in his separate chamber, probably dreaming of parliamentary votes and political strategies. Would he even notice she was gone before his valet brought him the note? She mounted Mercy with practiced ease, settling into the saddle that felt more like home than any room in that manor had ever felt. Come on, girl, she whispered. Let's go find ourselves. The horse moved forward willingly, carrying Adriana away from the golden cage, away from the cold politeness, away from the slow death of living with a man who saw her as a duty rather than a person. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. A new day was coming. And for the first time in 3 years, Adriana Vale felt something that had nothing to do with duty or expectations or social performance. She felt free. Behind her, London slept. Ahead of her, possibility waited. And in the manor she'd left behind, a note sat on a desk, waiting to shatter the careful control of a man who had spent 3 years believing that distance could protect him from pain. He was about to learn the truth. Distance doesn't prevent heartbreak, it causes it. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Nathaniel's valet, Stevens, entered the study with the morning's correspondence. The Duke sat at his desk as he did every morning at precisely 6 o'clock, already dressed, already armored in the day's responsibilities. Your Grace, I took the liberty of bringing coffee. You were working quite late last evening. Thank you, Stevens. Nathaniel didn't look up from the parliamentary report he was reviewing. The words blurred together, meaningless. He'd read the same paragraph 3 times without comprehension. He couldn't stop thinking about Adriana's face on the terrace at the Cunningham ball, the fire in her eyes when she'd challenged Lord Ashford, the way she'd looked at him afterward, not with the careful neutrality he'd grown accustomed to, but with something raw and wounded. You never said much of anything to me at all. The accusation haunted him. Will that be all, Your Grace? Yes, thank you. As Stevens withdrew, and Nathaniel forced himself to focus on the report. Agricultural subsidies, land reform, important matters that required his full attention. He would not allow himself to be distracted by... His hand brushed against something on the desk. A folded piece of paper propped against his inkwell, sealed with Adriana's personal seal. Strange. She never left him notes. They barely spoke, much less corresponded. He broke the seal with growing unease. The first line hit him like a physical blow. Your Grace, for 3 years, I have tried to be the wife you needed. By the time he reached the signature, his hands were shaking. Stevens! The word came out as a roar. The valet appeared instantly, his professional composure cracking at Nathaniel's expression. Your Grace? The Duchess. Where is she? I assume in her chambers, Your Grace. Shall I send for her lady's maid? Do it. Now! Stevens fled. Nathaniel stood, the note crumpling in his fist, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. Adriana wouldn't just leave. She was the Duchess of Ashbourne, for heaven's sake. People didn't simply walk away from such positions. Except she had. The note made that devastatingly clear. Sarah, Adriana's maid, appeared within minutes, her face pale. Your Grace, The Duchess isn't in her chambers. Her bed hasn't been slept in, and some of her things are missing. What things? Simple dresses, Your Grace. Her traveling cloak, her mother's shawl. But the jewelry, the fine gowns, everything valuable remains. Nathaniel's mind refused to process this information. When did you last see her? Yesterday evening, Your Grace, when she returned from the village. She dismissed me early, said she wanted to rest. The village? Of course. She was always going to the village, tending to tenants and problems he should have addressed himself but never found time for. Problems he'd delegated to his steward and forgotten. Send for Mr. Winters immediately, Nathaniel ordered. And have my horse saddled. Tell no one else about this. No one. Is that understood? Yes, Your Grace. But even as he gave orders, Nathaniel knew it was too late for secrecy. By noon, the entire household would know the Duchess of Ashbourne had vanished. By evening, the ton would be feasting on the scandal. He didn't care about the scandal. He cared about the woman who had written those words. I have been patient, silent, obedient, perfect, but I have also been invisible. Had he really made her feel invisible? The answer, he realized with sickening clarity, was yes. Mr. Winters, Nathaniel's most trusted investigator, arrived within the hour. A former Bow Street runner, he had handled delicate matters for the family for years, discreet, efficient, and utterly without judgment. Your Grace, he bowed slightly, his sharp eyes already assessing. I understand the Duchess is missing. She's not missing, Nathaniel said, the words tasting like ash. She left. Deliberately. He handed over the note. Winters read it quickly, his expression never changing. I see. And you wish me to locate her? Yes. No. Nathaniel paced his study like a caged animal. I don't know. She asked not to be followed. With respect, Your Grace, what you want me to do and what Her Grace requested may not be the same thing. Nathaniel stopped pacing. Find her. Make certain she's safe. But don't approach her. Don't bring her back against her will. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful arrangement. Just make sure she's safe. Very good, Your Grace. I'll begin immediately. After Winters left, Nathaniel stood alone in his study, surrounded by the trappings of power and success that suddenly felt meaningless. His eyes fell on the bookshelves lining the walls, first editions, rare volumes, books he'd collected but never read. On the third shelf, almost hidden, sat a slim volume with a worn spine. He pulled it free, recognizing it instantly. Sense and Sensibility by a Lady. He'd seen Adriana reading it once, months ago, in the drawing room. She'd set it aside when he entered, as if caught doing something inappropriate. He opened the cover. Inside, in her elegant handwriting, was an inscription. To Adriana, on your 16th birthday. Never stop believing in love. Your mother. Her mother had died 2 years before their marriage. Nathaniel remembered Adriana mentioning it once, in those first awkward weeks after their wedding, before he'd perfected the art of keeping her at distance. He'd barely acknowledged the comment. Now he stood in his study, holding his wife's book, reading her mother's words about believing in love, and something inside his chest cracked open. What had he done? Or, the investigation began discreetly, but the absence of the Duchess could not be hidden for long. Mrs. Morrison fielded questions from the staff with her usual efficiency, citing a sudden visit to a sick relative. But the servants weren't fools, and neither was London society. By the third day, the rumors had begun. Lady Pemberton, never one to miss an opportunity for viciousness, held court at her weekly salon. I heard she ran off with a lover, that Lord Fairfax, perhaps. They were quite cozy at the Cunningham ball. Nonsense, Mrs. Hastings countered, though her eyes gleamed with malicious excitement. I heard she's suffered a nervous collapse, locked away in some asylum. Either way, Lady Pemberton said with false sympathy, poor Duke Hawthorne. First a barren wife, now an absent one. The man cannot catch a break. Lord Marcus Fairfax, overhearing this conversation, felt his temper snap. Perhaps, Lady Pemberton, the Duke's problems have less to do with his wife's failings and more to do with his own. The room fell silent. I beg your pardon? Lady Pemberton's face flushed crimson. Lady Adriana is one of the finest women I've ever known. Intelligent, compassionate, brave. If she chose to leave, I'd wager it's because she finally recognized what the rest of us have known for years, that Duke Hawthorne is too blind to appreciate what stands right in front of him. He left before anyone could respond, but the damage was done. Within hours, the story had spread. Lord Fairfax had defended the missing Duchess. The implication was clear and scandalous. When Nathaniel heard about the incident, he wanted to call Marcus out for a duel. Then he reread Adriana's note and realized Marcus was right. He had been blind. For 3 years, catastrophically blind. Winters reported back on the 5th day. Nathaniel received him in the study, the room that had become both his fortress and his prison. I've located Her Grace, Winters said without preamble. Nathaniel's heart stopped. Where? A cottage in the Cotswolds. Belongs to a Mrs. Beatrice Thornbury. Her aunt, Nathaniel remembered now. Adriana had mentioned her once or twice. Her mother's unconventional sister who had never married, who lived independently and scandalized polite society with her forward thinking. Yes, Your Grace, the Duchess arrived 4 days ago. She's been, well, she appears to be quite well, actually. Meaning? Winters chose his words carefully. Meaning she doesn't appear to be in distress. She's been walking the countryside, working in the garden, visiting local villagers. Mrs. Thornbury's neighbors report she seems almost happy, Your Grace. Happy. Without him. The realization shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. You're certain she's safe? Quite certain. Mrs. Thornbury's cottage is remote but comfortable. The village is small and tight-knit. No one there knows Her Grace's true identity. Mrs. Thornbury introduced her as her niece from London. Nothing more. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Continue to monitor the situation, but do not approach. And Winters? Absolute discretion. Of course, Your Grace. After the investigator left, Nathaniel sat at his desk and did something he hadn't done since his father's funeral. He put his head in his hands and tried not to break. Heat. The past could not be outrun, but it could be examined. Nathaniel began spending his evenings going through the estate records Adriana had mentioned reading. What he found astonished him. Every report bore evidence of her attention, marginal notes in her handwriting, questions about tenant welfare, suggestions for improvements. She'd been managing aspects of his estates for months, perhaps years, without his knowledge or acknowledgement. The Yorkshire drainage problem she'd mentioned? She'd already commissioned an engineering survey, the village school funding. She'd been supplementing the teacher's salary from her own allowance, the medical emergencies among the tenant families. She'd established a fund and a system for rapid response. She had been building a better world inside his neglect, and he had never noticed. Mrs. Morrison found him one evening in Adriana's sitting room, surrounded by her journals and correspondence. The housekeeper's expression held rare emotion. Your Grace, perhaps you should rest. Did you know? Nathaniel asked without looking up from Adriana's careful notes about a tenant family's sick child. Did you know what she was doing? How much she cared? Yes, Your Grace. Why didn't you tell me? Mrs. Morrison's silence was answer enough. Why would she tell him? He'd made it abundantly clear he had no interest in his wife's daily activities. She was lonely, the housekeeper said finally. So terribly lonely. But she never complained, just kept trying to make herself useful. Kept hoping, I think, that if she proved her worth, you might finally see her. I saw her, Nathaniel said, his voice rough. No, Your Grace, you looked at her. There's a difference. On the 7th day, Nathaniel's mother arrived unannounced at Ashbourne Manor, a sure sign that the scandal had reached critical mass. The Dowager Duchess swept into his study like a force of nature, her silver hair immaculate, her expression thunderous. Explain. Good morning, Mother. Do not good morning me, Nathaniel. Your wife has vanished. The tone is alight with speculation, and you sit here doing nothing. Have you completely taken leave of your senses? Adriana isn't lost. She knows exactly where she is. His mother's eyes narrowed. You've found her. I know where she is. That's not the same as finding her. Then bring her back. Every day she remains gone, the scandal grows worse. People are saying terrible things, that she's left you for a lover, that she's mad, that you drove her away through cruelty. Perhaps I did. The Dowager Duchess stopped mid-tirade. What? Nathaniel met his mother's gaze. Perhaps I did drive her away, not through cruelty, but through indifference. Through 3 years of treating her like a piece of furniture. Through making her feel invisible in her own home. Nathaniel, that's ridiculous. You were perfectly polite to her. You provided for her every material need, but not her emotional ones, not her need to be seen, to be heard, to matter. His mother's expression shifted to something almost like alarm. What has brought on this sentiment? Reading her journals, seeing what she accomplished while I ignored her, realizing that I married a remarkable woman and then spent 3 years ensuring she knew I didn't want her. Didn't want her? His mother looked genuinely confused. Of course you wanted her. You chose her yourself. I warned you she was too far beneath you, too inexperienced, but you insisted. I insisted because I was falling in love with her, Nathaniel said quietly. The admission hung in the air between them. You? What? From the moment I met her at the Harrington ball 3 years ago, she was different from every other woman thrust at me. She spoke her mind. She had opinions. She made me laugh. He laughed bitterly. So naturally, I married her and then spent 3 years making certain she could never get close enough to hurt me. Hurt you? Nathaniel, what are you talking about? But Nathaniel shook his head. His mother, for all her intelligence, had never understood. She'd survived her own marriage to his father through emotional detachment, through viewing love as a weakness. She could never comprehend that he'd been trying to avoid his father's cruelty and had instead replicated its effects through different means. I need to go to her, he said. Absolutely not. You'll send a letter, a formal request for her return. If she refuses, we'll handle it through proper channels. There are no proper channels for asking your wife to forgive you for breaking her heart. His mother stood. Nathaniel, if you go crawling after her, you'll lose what little power you have in this situation. A duke does not beg. Then perhaps, Nathaniel said, I'll go as a husband instead of a duke. He left for the Cotswolds at dawn, riding alone, bringing no servants or carriages or trappings of his position, just himself and a horse and 3 years of regret. The journey took 2 days. He stopped at inns where no one knew him, where he was just another traveler. The anonymity felt strange and liberating. No one bowing, no one seeking favors, no one watching his every move. Was this what Adriana felt now? This freedom? Winters had provided detailed directions to Mrs. Thornberry's cottage. It sat on a hillside overlooking a small village surrounded by wild gardens that clearly cared nothing for formal landscaping. Smoke rose from the chimney, chickens pecked in the yard. It looked nothing like Ashbourne Manor's grandeur. It looked like a home. Nathaniel dismounted and stood at the gate, suddenly terrified. What if she refused to see him? What if she'd meant what she wrote about not returning at all? What if he'd destroyed something beyond repair? The front door opened and a woman emerged. Not Adriana, older, with wild gray hair and eyes that assessed him instantly. "You're the Duke." Not a question. "I'm Nathaniel Hawthorne," he replied. "I'm looking for my wife." "Are you now?" Mrs. Thornberry descended the steps, moving like someone half her age. "Took you long enough." "Is she here? Will she see me?" "That's up to her, not me. But I'll warn you now, Your Grace, you've done enough damage. If you're here to drag her back to London to save your reputation, you can turn around and leave." "I'm here to apologize." "Apologies are just words. What she needs is change." "I know." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Mrs. Thornberry's expression softened slightly. "She's walking the ridge path, that way." She pointed toward a trail leading up the hillside. "If she runs, don't chase her. If she sends you away, go. Clear?" "Crystal." "And Your Grace?" "My niece is the finest woman I've ever known. She deserves a man who recognizes that." "I know that too," Nathaniel said quietly. "I just forgot it along the way." He left his horse and followed the path, his heart pounding harder with each step. Spring flowers dotted the hillside, wild and beautiful and free, so different from the manicured gardens at Ashbourne Manor. He found her at the crest of the hill, standing at the edge of the ridge, looking out over the valley below. The wind caught her hair, loose and unbound, the way he'd never seen it in 3 years of marriage. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry, no elaborate styling. She looked like the girl from the Harrington Ball, the one who had made his heart stutter with her laugh. She turned at the sound of his approach, and her expression cycled through shock, anger, and something too complicated to name. "How did you find me?" "I'm a duke. I have resources. I asked you not to look for me." "I know. I'm sorry." They stood 20 feet apart, an impossible distance that felt like miles. Nathaniel searched for the right words and found none adequate. "Adriana, No." She held up a hand. "You don't get to come here and make this easy with pretty apologies. You don't get to show up and expect me to just return because you finally decided I matter." "I never thought you didn't matter." "Then what did you think?" The question cracked with 3 years of pain. "What was I to you, Nathaniel? Because I've spent 3 years trying to understand, and I still can't make sense of it. You chose me, you pursued me, you married me, and then you acted like I was a stranger you were forced to tolerate." "You're right." She blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. "You're absolutely right," he continued, "and you deserve an explanation. The truth I should have given you 3 years ago. Then tell me." She crossed her arms, defensive. "Tell me why you married a woman you didn't want." "I married you because I wanted you too much." The words tumbled out, raw and unplanned. "Because from the moment we met, you terrified me. Terrified you. My father destroyed my mother through cruelty disguised as love. I watched him manipulate her emotions, control her through affection and withdrawal until she was just a shadow. I swore I would never become him. I swore I would never give anyone that kind of power over me." Adriana's expression shifted slightly, confusion replacing some of the anger. "And then I met you," Nathaniel continued, "and you made me laugh. You challenged me. You saw through every carefully constructed wall I'd built, and I realized I was falling in love, and that terrified me because what if I was like him? What if loving you meant destroying you? So you decided not to love me at all. I decided distance was safer for both of us." He took a step closer. "I was wrong. So catastrophically wrong. Because in trying to protect you from becoming my mother, I turned into my father anyway. Different methods, same result." The wind rustled through the grass. A bird called somewhere nearby. Adriana stood very still. "You broke my heart," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. You made me feel worthless. I know. You let me believe I wasn't enough, that I'd failed somehow. I know. And I'm sorry. Those words are insufficient, but they're all I have." He closed more of the distance between them. "You asked me once what you were to me. You were everything I wanted and everything I feared, and I chose fear. And now? Now fear doesn't matter anymore, because losing you is worse than anything I was afraid of." Adriana's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I can't go back to the way things were. I won't. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to build something new, something real. Why should I believe anything changes? It was the right question, the one he deserved. Because I've spent the last week reading your journals, seeing all the work you've done, all the people you've helped, all the ways you've made my estates better without me even noticing. Because I've realized that you're not just the woman I married. You're the woman I should have been partnering with all along. Because for the first time in 3 years, I actually see you, Adriana, and I'm not afraid anymore. She wiped at her eyes, angry at the tears. Pretty words from a man who's had 3 years to say them. You're right, so let me offer you something more than words. He took a deep breath. Stay here. Don't come back to London. Not yet. Her eyes widened. What? You came here to find yourself again, to remember who you are beyond being a duchess. Do that. Take all the time you need. He pulled a folded document from his pocket. This is a letter authorizing you to make any decisions regarding the estates. Hire, fire, spend whatever funds are necessary, run things as you see fit. Nathaniel, and this, he continued, pulling out a second document, is a legal agreement giving you independent access to your portion of the Ashbourne accounts. No more allowances, no more asking permission. Your money is yours. Adriana stared at the papers like they might bite. I don't want control of your estates. I'm not giving you control. I'm offering you partnership, true partnership, the kind we should have had from the beginning. And you? She asked carefully. What do you want? Time with you, here. Away from London, away from the ton, away from every expectation and performance. He met her eyes. 7 days. That's all I'm asking. 7 days to prove I can be different, to show you who I am when I'm not hiding behind a title. If at the end of 7 days you still want me gone, I'll go. No arguments, no conditions. And if I say no right now, then I'll respect that and leave. But Adriana? He stepped close enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his gaze. I'm not giving up on us. Even if you send me away today, I'll spend the rest of my life becoming the man you deserved from the start. Whether that's as your husband or just as someone who finally learned what he lost. The tears fell then, streaming down her face. Nathaniel wanted to brush them away, to pull her close, but he held himself still. This was her choice, her decision. 7 days, she said finally. 7 days. But we're not sharing a room. A startled laugh escaped him. I wouldn't dream of it. And if you revert to the cold, distant Duke for even one moment, then you throw me out immediately. I'll accept whatever you decide. She studied him for a long moment, searching for lies or manipulation. He let her look, hiding nothing. Aunt Beatrice is going to be insufferable about this, Adriana said. I suspect I deserve insufferable. You absolutely do. And despite everything, despite the hurt and the anger and the 3 years of pain, the corner of her mouth quirked upward in something that might eventually become a smile. It was enough. For now, it was enough. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Aunt Beatrice proved exactly as insufferable as Adriana had predicted. She greeted Nathaniel's arrival at the cottage with raised eyebrows and a smile that could only be described as triumphant. So the Duke decides to grace us with his presence, she said, looking him up and down like he was a horse she was considering purchasing. You look terrible. Good. You should. Aunt Beatrice, Adriana warned. What? He does. All hollow-eyed and rumpled. About time he experienced some discomfort. She turned back to Nathaniel. There's a spare room in the back, barely bigger than a closet. You'll take it and be grateful. Yes, ma'am. And you'll help with chores. I don't care if you're a duke. Here, everyone works. I understand. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. You're being suspiciously agreeable. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. We'll see. She gestured toward the cottage. Well, come on then. Standing around gawking won't fix anything. Adriana, show him where to stable his horse. Your Grace, I hope you know how to peel potatoes because we're having stew for dinner. The first day passed in a strange blur of domestic normalcy that felt nothing like Nathaniel's life in London. He mucked out the small stable while Adriana fed the chickens, maintaining a careful distance from each other. He helped Beatrice in the garden, pulling weeds under her exacting supervision. He peeled potatoes at the kitchen table while the two women prepared dinner, their easy conversation washing over him like a foreign language. This was Adriana's world now. Simple, honest, free of pretense. He'd never felt more out of place or more determined to belong. Dinner was a revelation. They sat at a scarred wooden table, eating from simple pottery bowls, and Beatrice held court like a benevolent dictator. "So, Your Grace," she said, ladling more stew into his bowl without asking, "what exactly is your plan here? You've apologized, you've shown up uninvited, and now you're… what? Hoping 7 days of playing peasant will fix 3 years of neglect?" "Aunt Beatrice," Adriana said again, but there was less heat in it this time. "It's a fair question," Nathaniel replied. "And the honest answer is, I don't have a plan beyond trying to prove I can be better, that I want to be better. Want and can are different things." "I know." Beatrice studied him over her wine glass. "You hurt her badly." "I did. She cried for weeks after the wedding, wrote me letters trying to understand what she'd done wrong." Nathaniel's stomach twisted. "She did nothing wrong." "I know that, you know that, but she didn't know that. She thought she'd failed somehow." Beatrice's voice sharpened. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch someone you love shrink themselves smaller and smaller, trying to fit into a space where they're not wanted?" "Aunt Beatrice, that's enough," Adriana said, her cheeks flushed. "No, it's not." Nathaniel met Beatrice's gaze. "You're right to be angry. You're right to protect her. And you're right that I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking for the chance to earn it anyway." The silence stretched taut. Then Beatrice sighed. "Well, at least you're not making excuses." She stood, gathering empty bowls. "Adriana, show him to his room. Your Grace, tomorrow you're helping me repair the chicken coop. It's been listing to one side since the winter storms." It was a dismissal, and an acceptance rolled into one. The second day, Nathaniel discovered that manual labor was both harder and more satisfying than he'd anticipated. He and Beatrice worked in companionable silence for hours, replacing rotted boards and reinforcing the coop's structure. His hands blistered, his back ached. He'd never felt better. Adriana appeared mid-morning with water and bread, watching him work with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're actually quite good at this," she said as he hammered a nail with surprising accuracy. "I'm discovering hidden talents." He wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. "Who knew a duke could be useful?" A small smile flickered across her face before she could hide it. That evening, they walked together. At Beatrice's pointed suggestion that they stop dancing around each other and actually talk. The ridge path overlooked the valley, bathed in golden sunset light. "Tell me about the tenants," Nathaniel said. "The ones you helped. I want to know their names." Adriana glanced at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because you knew them. You saw them as people, not problems in a ledger. I want to understand what you understood." So she told him. About Thomas Brennan and his wife, about the widow Patterson's crumbling chimney, about the young family whose baby had survived a difficult winter because Adriana had ensured they could afford a doctor. She spoke with passion and detail, her whole face transforming. And Nathaniel listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time in their marriage. "You built something beautiful," he said when she finished. "You took my neglect and turned it into care." "I did what needed doing." "No, you did what I should have been doing, what we should have been doing together." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Adriana, I want to make you a promise. When we return to London, if we return to London, things will be different. We'll manage the estates together, every decision, every change. True partnership. That's a significant promise." "I know, and I mean it." She searched his face in the fading light. "I want to believe you." "Then let me prove it." The third day brought their first real argument. It started innocently enough. Nathaniel mentioned casually over breakfast that he'd sent a letter to his steward, instructing him to implement some of Adriana's suggested improvements to the Yorkshire properties. Adriana's fork clattered against her plate. "You did what?" "I sent instructions to… without consulting me?" He blinked, confused. "But they were your ideas. I was implementing your suggestions." "Which you decided to do unilaterally, without discussion, without asking if I wanted my private notes turned into official policy. Her voice rose. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Nathaniel. You don't see me as a partner. You see me as a source of good ideas that you then control. That's not, isn't it? You took my work and made it yours. You didn't ask. You didn't discuss. You just assumed you had the right. Beatrice, who had been quietly drinking tea, stood and left the kitchen without a word, clearly recognizing a fight that needed to happen. Nathaniel felt his own temper flare. I was trying to help. I was trying to show you that I value your contributions. By taking credit for them? By making decisions about work I did without your knowledge or support? Adriana stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I spent 3 years being invisible. I won't spend the next 3 being a silent resource you mine for ideas. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? Because from here, it looks like the same pattern with prettier words. The accusation hit hard because it held a grain of truth. He had assumed. He had taken her work and acted on it without consultation. Different methods, same underlying problem. You're right, he said quietly. I what? You're right, I did it again. I saw your ideas as something to fix a problem, not as your work to direct. He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. I'm trying, Adriana, but 3 years of habits don't disappear in 3 days. I know that, but I need to see effort, not just intention. Then tell me what effort looks like. Tell me what you need. She sat back down slowly. I need you to ask before you act. I need you to see me as an equal, not as someone whose thoughts are interesting but whose authority is negotiable. Her voice cracked slightly. I need to know that this isn't just you playing a role for 7 days. Nathaniel moved to kneel beside her chair, ignoring propriety. I swear to you, this isn't a role. This is me trying to become who I should have been from the start. And I will make mistakes. But I'm asking you to call me on them when I do, just like this. Don't let me slide back into old patterns. She looked down at him, tears threatening. This is terrifying. What is? Starting to hope again, starting to believe this might be real. He reached for her hand, asking permission with his eyes. She didn't pull away. Then we'll be terrified together. The 4th day, everything changed. Nathaniel woke to shouting from outside the cottage. He threw on clothes and rushed downstairs to find Beatrice at the door, arguing with a well-dressed man whose face was red with anger. Don't care what excuses you're making, the man was saying. The lease is terminated. You have 1 month to vacate. Mr. Hartley, we've been over this, Beatrice said, her voice tight. The lease has 3 years remaining, which I'm within my rights to terminate given your clear violation of the Moral Standards Clause. What Moral Standards Clause? The one that prohibits housing persons of disreputable character. His eyes flicked toward the interior of the cottage, where Adriana had appeared on the stairs. Or in this case, runaway wives who've abandoned their marital duties. The words fell like stones into still water. How dare you? Beatrice hissed. How dare I, madam? The entire county knows you're harboring the scandalous Duchess of Ashbourne. Did you think no one would notice? Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Nathaniel appeared at Beatrice's shoulder. I think you should leave. Mr. Hartley's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. And you must be the Duke. How noble, coming to retrieve your wayward wife. But that doesn't change the situation. I've already drawn up the termination papers. Mrs. Thornberry has 30 days. On what grounds? Nathaniel's voice had gone cold and dangerous. A moral standards clause in a cottage lease is highly unusual. Let me see the contract. I don't have to show you anything. Actually, you do. I'm a barrister by training, Mr. Hartley, and I know property law quite well. Either produce the contract with this supposed clause, or admit you're manufacturing an excuse to evict a tenant you've decided to punish. Hartley's face went even redder. The Duchess's scandal has brought unwanted attention to my properties. I have every right to protect my interests. What scandal? Adriana's voice rang out clear and strong. She descended the stairs, her chin raised. The scandal of taking time away from London? Of visiting my aunt? Or is the real scandal that I dared to make a choice without a man's permission? You abandoned your husband and your duties. I took a leave from a situation that was harming my well-being. That's not abandonment. That's survival. The Ton doesn't see it that way. The Ton, Beatrice interjected icily, can go hang. This is my home, Mr. Hartley. I've paid my lease on time for 15 years. You have no legal grounds to evict me, and you know it. Then I'll make your life difficult enough that you'll leave voluntarily. Nathaniel stepped fully outside, and something in his bearing made Hartley take a step back. This was the Duke of Ashbourne now, not the man who'd been peeling potatoes and repairing chicken coops. Let me make something very clear, Mr. Hartley. You're well within your rights to try to evict Mrs. Thornberry, and I'm well within my rights to use every legal and political resource at my disposal to ensure you fail. I know judges. I know barristers. I know people who can make the next decade of your life extraordinarily complicated. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. Touch this lease and I'll bury you in litigation so expensive you'll wish you'd never heard the name Thornberry. This is extortion. This is protection of family, something I should have been doing all along. Hartley sputtered, clearly not expecting such resistance. The scandal. There is no scandal, Adriana said firmly. There's a wife who needed space and a husband who's learning to give it to her. That's a private family matter, not public entertainment. But London can speculate all it wants, Nathaniel finished. What London thinks is irrelevant to this lease and to Mrs. Thornberry's rights as a tenant. Now, are we done here? Hartley looked between them, calculating. Whatever he saw made him reconsider. This isn't over. Yes, Beatrice said quietly. It is. Good day, Mr. Hartley. He left, but the damage was done. The fragile peace of the cottage had been shattered by the outside world's intrusion. Inside, Beatrice sank into a chair, suddenly looking her age. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have been more careful about who knew you were here. This isn't your fault, Adriana said, kneeling beside her. Aunt Beatrice, none of this is your fault. But it's my home at risk, which we'll protect, Nathaniel said firmly. I meant what I told Hartley. He won't evict you. Beatrice looked at him with new respect. That was well done, Your Grace. The Duke returning in force. Nathaniel, he corrected. And I wasn't acting as a duke. I was acting as someone who's been welcomed into your home and refuses to let you suffer for that kindness. But Mr. Hartley's visit proved to be just the beginning. That afternoon, as Adriana walked to the village for supplies, she noticed people whispering. Shopkeepers who had been friendly suddenly became cold. Mrs. Miller, who ran the bakery, actually refused to serve her. I'm sorry, miss, but I can't be associated with... Well, you understand. No, Adriana said quietly. I don't understand. What exactly am I being accused of? Mrs. Miller looked uncomfortable. It's not my place to say, but Mr. Hartley's been talking about your situation, and people have opinions. About a woman visiting her aunt? About a duchess abandoning her duties to hide in the countryside like some kind of... Well, it's not proper, is it? Adriana felt the familiar weight of judgment settling on her shoulders. Even here, hundreds of miles from London, she couldn't escape it. She returned to the cottage empty-handed and furious. They're turning on me, she told Nathaniel and Beatrice. The village. The same people who were friendly 3 days ago now look at me like I'm a criminal. Hartley's been spreading poison, Beatrice said darkly. He has influence in the village, owns several properties, employs a number of people. If he's decided to make you a target, others will follow to protect their own interests. This is insane. I've done nothing wrong. You've defied expectations, Nathaniel said quietly. For some people, that's crime enough. Adriana paced the small kitchen like a caged animal. So what? I hide here like some shameful secret? I let them win? Or, Nathaniel said slowly, we stop hiding. Both women turned to look at him. What are you suggesting? Beatrice asked. I'm suggesting we face this head on. The village has questions, opinions. Fine. Let's answer them. Publicly. Honestly. That's madness, Adriana said. You want to air our private matters in front of strangers? I want to stop letting fear and gossip control our lives. I want to stand beside you openly and tell anyone who'll listen that you did nothing wrong, that I was the one who failed, that we're trying to build something better. The scandal will be even worse. Let it be worse. I don't care anymore, Adriana. I care about you, about protecting you and Beatrice, about stopping this poison before it spreads further. The ton will crucify you. Then they'll crucify me, but they'll have to go through me to get to you. Adriana stared at him, stunned. This was not the careful, controlled duke she'd married. This was someone raw and honest and willing to risk everything. You're serious? Completely. Nathaniel, Beatrice interjected, this could destroy your political career, your reputation. I know. Your mother will be apoplectic. I know that too. And you're willing to accept those consequences? He looked at Adriana. Yes. What? The next morning, Nathaniel rode into the village and requested a meeting with the village council. By afternoon, half the village had gathered in the assembly hall, drawn by curiosity and the promise of spectacle. Adriana stood at the back of the hall, her heart pounding. This was insanity. Beautiful, terrifying insanity. Nathaniel stood at the front, facing the crowd without notes or preparation. Just himself and the truth. My name is Nathaniel Hawthorne, he began. Some of you know me as the Duke of Ashbourne, but today I'm here as a husband who made terrible mistakes. The crowd murmured. 3 years ago, I married a remarkable woman. Intelligent, compassionate, brave, everything I could have hoped for. And then I spent 3 years making her feel worthless because I was too afraid to love her properly. Someone gasped. This was not what anyone had expected. She didn't abandon me. She saved herself. From a marriage that was slowly destroying her. From a husband who treated her with polite indifference. From a life where she was invisible despite being surrounded by people. Your Grace, Mr. Hartley stood, his voice sharp. This is highly inappropriate. Sit down, Hartley. The command in Nathaniel's voice left no room for argument. You wanted a scandal. I'm giving you truth instead. He turned back to the crowd. My wife is here under her aunt's protection because I failed to protect her myself. She's here because she needed space to remember who she was beyond being my accessory, and she's being judged for it by people who have no idea what she endured. But propriety, someone began. Propriety? Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. What's proper about a marriage where two people are miserable? What's proper about a woman who has to disappear to feel alive? What's proper about judging someone for choosing herself over suffering? Adriana felt tears streaming down her face. I'm not asking you to approve of our situation, Nathaniel continued. I'm asking you to show basic human decency, to stop punishing a woman whose only crime was expecting her husband to see her, to stop treating her like a scandal when the real scandal is how I treated her for 3 years. The hall had gone completely silent. And if that's not enough, if you still want to judge and whisper and make life difficult for Mrs. Thornbury and her niece, then do it. But know that I will fight you, every step. Because I spent 3 years failing to stand up for my wife, and I will not make that mistake again. He looked directly at Mr. Hartley. That lease termination? I'll tie it up in court for years. Your reputation? I'll make sure every newspaper in England knows you tried to evict an elderly woman to punish her niece for daring to leave an unhappy marriage. Your business interests? I have friends in Parliament who would be very interested in the zoning irregularities I noticed on your properties. You wouldn't dare? Try me! The crowd erupted in whispers and exclamations. Nathaniel stood his ground, waiting. Then, from the middle of the crowd, an elderly woman stood. Mrs. Pembroke, Beatrice's neighbor. I've known Beatrice Thornbury for 12 years, she said in a clear, strong voice. She's helped every family in this village at one time or another. When my husband died, she sat with me every night for a month. When the Fletcher's barn burned, she organized the rebuilding. She's good people, and if she's protecting her niece, then I trust that niece deserves protection. Here, someone else called. And honestly, Mrs. Pembroke continued, who among us hasn't wanted to escape a difficult situation? The Duchess showed courage. Maybe we should respect that instead of condemning it. More voices joined in support. Not everyone, Mr. Hartley's faction remained silent and hostile, but enough to shift the balance. Nathaniel caught Adriana's eye across the crowded room. She nodded slightly, then stepped forward. May I speak? The crowd parted for her like water. She joined Nathaniel at the front, her hand trembling slightly as she faced them. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering that there might be more to this story than gossip. And thank you, Mrs. Pembroke, for defending my aunt." She took a deep breath. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if my husband and I can rebuild what was broken. But I know that I deserve the chance to find out without being punished for wanting more than mere survival. That's all I ask. The chance to be seen as a person, not a scandal." The applause started slowly, then grew. Not universal, but real. As they left the hall, Adriana felt like she could breathe for the first time in days. Nathaniel walked beside her, close but not touching, until they reached the path back to the cottage. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," she said quietly. "I was terrified." "Good. Bravery without fear isn't bravery. It's just recklessness." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Nathaniel said, "Adriana, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made her stop walking. "What?" "My father. I told you he was cruel to my mother, but I didn't tell you everything." He stared at the horizon, his jaw tight. "He didn't just manipulate her emotionally. He isolated her, made her dependent on him for everything: money, social connections, basic decisions. By the time she died, she was a shell, and everyone knew. But no one helped because she was his wife and he was a duke, and what happened in their marriage was private. Nathaniel, I swore I'd never be him, and in trying so hard to avoid his cruelty, I replicated his isolation. Different methods, same result. You were alone in our marriage just like my mother was alone in hers." The confession hung between them, raw and painful. "I'm not your mother," Adriana said gently. "And you're not your father. You made mistakes, but you're here now. You're trying. That matters." "Does it? Does trying undo 3 years of harm?" "No, but it's a start." She reached for his hand. "You stood up for me in that hall. You risked everything, your reputation, your career, your political future. That's not nothing. It's what I should have done 3 years ago." "Maybe, but you're doing it now." He turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. "I love you, Adriana. I've loved you since the night we met, and I'm so sorry it took me this long to be brave enough to say it." The words she'd waited 3 years to hear should have felt triumphant. Instead, they felt heavy with all the pain between them. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then believe this. I will spend the rest of my life proving it's true." That evening, a rider arrived at the cottage bearing urgent news from London. Nathaniel's mother had collapsed. The physician believed it was her heart. She was asking for him. The message was clear: return immediately. Adriana watched Nathaniel read the letter, watched the conflict play across his face. Duty versus commitment. His mother versus his promises. "Go," she said before he could speak. "Adriana, your mother needs you. Go." "But our 7 days can wait. Family comes first." She smiled sadly. "I know that better than anyone." He caught her hand. "Come with me." The request shocked her. "To London?" "Yes. Together as partners, as—" He hesitated. "As a real couple." "Nathaniel, London will be vicious. The scandal is already—" "I don't care. I stood in front of this village and declared my love for you. I'm not going to hide it in London." His grip tightened. "Come with me. Face them with me. Let's stop running from the ton and start building the life we want despite them." Adriana's mind raced. This was everything she'd feared and everything she'd wanted. A public declaration, a real partnership, but also exposure to the very society that had broken her. "If I go back," she said slowly, "it has to be different. No more separate bedrooms, no more polite distance. I won't return to survive. I'll return to live." "Yes, all of that, I promise." "And the estates, real partnership in managing them." "Yes. And decisions, every major decision we make together." "Yes. Anything, everything, just come with me." She looked at this man who had hurt her so deeply and was now offering her everything she'd ever wanted. Could she trust it? Could she trust him? More importantly, could she trust herself to survive if this fragile hope shattered? But standing here, watching him plead for a chance she'd already half given him, Adriana realized something crucial. She was no longer the girl who had disappeared into his shadow. She had found herself in this cottage, in this village, in the act of choosing herself, and that self was strong enough to take this risk. "All right," she said, "let's go to London. Together? Together." His relief was palpable. He pulled her close, and for the first time in their marriage, she let herself lean into his embrace. But as they prepared to leave, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the tree line, a man who had followed Nathaniel from London, hired by someone who wanted the scandal to grow, not diminish. And in his pocket was a document that would change everything, a marriage certificate bearing Nathaniel's signature, dated 6 months before his wedding to Adriana. A marriage to someone else. A marriage to someone else. The journey back to London took 2 days of hard riding, the spring rain turning the roads to mud and slowing their progress. Nathaniel and Adriana traveled together in his carriage, the space between them charged with new possibility and old fear. They spoke little, both lost in thoughts of what awaited them in the city. His dying mother, the ravenous ton, the rebuilding of a marriage that had nearly destroyed them both. Neither of them knew that destruction of a different kind was already waiting. The figure who had watched from the tree line was already in London, the damning document secured in his coat. His employer, Lady Pemberton, sat in her drawing room receiving the news with barely concealed glee. "You're certain the marriage certificate is legitimate?" "Completely, my lady. Signed and witnessed 6 months before his marriage to the current Duchess." Lady Pemberton's smile was razor sharp. "And the woman?" "Disappeared shortly after. No record of divorce or annulment, which means the Duke of Ashbourne is a bigamist, and his precious Duchess is nothing more than a mistress playing at nobility." She stood, her mind already calculating. This will destroy them both, God. Ashbourne Manor loomed before them like a monument to everything complicated in their lives. Adriana had left in darkness, fleeing a prison of politeness. She returned in daylight, choosing partnership over safety. The difference felt monumental. Mrs. Morrison met them at the door, her usual composure cracking with relief. "Your Graces, thank heaven. The Dowager Duchess has been asking for you constantly. The physician says her heart is weak, but she's stable for now." "I'll go to her immediately," Nathaniel said. "We'll go to her," Adriana corrected, her hand finding his. Mrs. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly, but she merely nodded. "Of course, Your Graces. She's in her chambers." The Dowager Duchess lay propped against pillows, her silver hair unbound, her face drawn but alert. When Nathaniel and Adriana entered together, hand in hand, her eyes widened. "Well," she said, her voice weaker than Adriana had ever heard it. "This is unexpected." "Mother." Nathaniel moved to her bedside, Adriana following. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dying, obviously. Don't insult me with pleasantries." But her sharp gaze was on their joined hands. "I see the prodigal Duchess has returned." "Mother, I'm here because your son asked me to be," Adriana said quietly, "and because despite everything, I didn't want him to face this alone." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. "You could have stayed away. Would have been the sensible thing, given the scandal." "I'm learning that sensible and right aren't always the same thing." Something shifted in the older woman's expression. "Sit, both of you. If I'm going to die, I'd prefer to do it with some truth spoken." They sat, still holding hands, while the Dowager Duchess gathered her thoughts. "I was cruel to you," she said finally, looking at Adriana. "From the beginning. I thought you were beneath my son, beneath this family. I thought he'd chosen you out of some misguided romanticism that would fade." "Mother, you don't have to—" "Quiet, Nathaniel. I'm confessing." She turned back to Adriana. "I was wrong. You've done more for this family's tenants and estates in 3 years than I did in 30. Mrs. Morrison keeps me informed. The schools, the medical fund, the improvements. You saw people where I saw obligations." Adriana felt her throat tighten. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm apologizing, not asking for gratitude." The Dowager's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Nathaniel helped her drink. I raised my son to fear emotion because I feared it myself. I survived my marriage by becoming cold. I taught him coldness was strength. You survived, Nathaniel said gently. That took its own kind of strength. Perhaps, but it nearly destroyed your marriage before it began. She looked between them. Are you really trying to rebuild this? Yes, they said in unison. The dowager's smile was faint but genuine. Good. You'll need unity for what's coming. What do you mean? The scandal, you fools. Did you think disappearing to the countryside would make it vanish? London has been feasting on your story for weeks, and now that you're back, she shook her head. Prepare for war. The war began the next morning. Nathaniel woke early to find an urgent message from Lord Pembroke requesting an immediate meeting. He left Adriana still sleeping. They had shared a room for the first time in their marriage, though both had been too exhausted for anything beyond the simple intimacy of proximity, and rode to Pembroke's townhouse. His friend met him in the study, his face grave. Hawthorne, thank you for coming. What's wrong? Pembroke poured them both brandy despite the early hour. There's a rumor circulating, a nasty one. I wanted you to hear it from me before the gossip rags get hold of it. Nathaniel's stomach sank. Tell me. Someone is claiming you were already married when you wed Lady Adriana, that there's a certificate, a prior marriage that was never dissolved. The room tilted. That's impossible. I know. I told everyone who'd listen it was fabrication. But Hawthorne, Pembroke's expression was troubled. Lady Pemberton is pushing this story hard. She claims to have documentation. Documentation of what? I was never married before Adriana. This is slander. I believe you, but you need to address this publicly and quickly. If this story gains traction, it could destroy everything. Your marriage, your title, your political career. Adriana would be labeled a mistress. Your potential children illegitimate. Nathaniel stood, pacing. Who is this woman I supposedly married? The rumor says a girl named Catherine Wells. Allegedly, you met her during your grand tour, married her in some romantic gesture, and then abandoned her when you returned to England and your duties. The name meant nothing to him. I never met anyone named Catherine Wells. I never married anyone before Adriana. Then prove it, publicly, before this poison spreads further. By the time Nathaniel returned to Ashbourne Manor, the story had already reached Adriana. She stood in the drawing room, a scandal sheet crumpled in her fist, her face pale. Is it true? No, absolutely not. I swear to you, Adriana, I was never married to anyone before you. She studied his face, searching for lies. Then where is this coming from? Lady Pemberton, apparently. Pembroke says she claims to have a marriage certificate. That's impossible unless it's forged. Obviously it's forged, but proving that quickly enough to stop the damage. He ran his hands through his hair. This is exactly what my enemies have been waiting for. A scandal big enough to destroy me. Adriana's mind was racing. Who benefits from this? Who wants you destroyed badly enough to fabricate documents? Take your pick. I've made enemies in Parliament, blocked legislation, opposed powerful interests. Any number of people would love to see me fall. But Lady Pemberton isn't politically powerful. She's a gossip, not a player. Adriana's eyes narrowed. Which means someone is using her. Someone who knew this would hurt you most through me. What do you mean? Think about it, Nathaniel. A financial scandal might damage you politically. A sexual scandal might be quietly hushed. But this? This destroys our marriage. It makes me look like a fool who married a bigamist. It invalidates everything we've been trying to rebuild. She was right. This wasn't just an attack on him. It was an attack designed to drive them apart. Then we face it together, Nathaniel said firmly. Like we should have faced everything from the beginning. How? By finding the real marriage certificate, mine and yours, by exposing this forgery, and by making it very clear to anyone who's watching that nothing will break us apart. Oh, the investigation began immediately. Nathaniel sent for his solicitor, his records, and every document related to his grand tour 7 years prior. Adriana, meanwhile, began working through the social connections that had formed during her charitable work. Mrs. Morrison, she called, finding the housekeeper in the kitchen. I need your help. The older woman looked up from the menu she was planning. Of course, Your Grace. The servants' network? It's the best intelligence system in London, better than any investigator or spy. I need to know everything being said about this scandal. Who's pushing it? Who believes it? Who's questioning it? Mrs. Morrison's eyes gleamed with understanding. You want to know where the story originated? Exactly, and more importantly, who paid for it to be spread. Within hours, a network of maids, footmen, butlers, and cooks across London was quietly gathering information. The servant class saw everything the Ton tried to hide, heard every unguarded conversation, witnessed every private transaction. And they reported to Mrs. Morrison, who reported to Adriana. By evening, a picture was emerging. Lord Ashford, Mrs. Morrison said, presenting her findings in Adriana's sitting room. He's been seen meeting with Lady Pemberton multiple times. His valet reports he's been agitated, talking about revenge for the Cunningham Ball incident. Adriana remembered that night vividly, when I challenged his views on tenant management. Exactly, Your Grace. He took it as a public humiliation, and he's been waiting for an opportunity to retaliate. But where would he get a forged marriage certificate? That's where it gets interesting. His nephew works in the records office, has access to official seals, blank certificates, all the materials needed for a convincing forgery. Nathaniel, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. We need proof. Something concrete that ties Ashford to the forgery. Already working on it, Your Grace, Mrs. Morrison said with grim satisfaction. My network includes several servants in Lord Ashford's household. If there's evidence, we'll find it. The next day, the scandal sheets were relentless. The Morning Post ran a lurid story about the bigamous Duke and his unlawful Duchess. The London Chronicle speculated about where the mysterious first wife had gone. The gossip columns had a field day. Adriana and Nathaniel attended his mother's bedside that morning to find her reading the papers with disgust. Vultures, the Dowager Duchess muttered. Every last one of them. We're handling it, Nathaniel said. Are you? Because from here it looks like you're being crucified in print. We're building a case, Adriana explained. We know who's behind it. We just need proof. The Dowager studied her daughter-in-law with new appreciation. You're not running this time. No, I learned something in the countryside. Running doesn't solve problems, it just delays them. And you're standing with him? Even though this scandal paints you as either a fool or a mistress? I'm standing with the truth, and with my husband. The simple statement carried weight. The Dowager nodded slowly. Good. Then listen to me. You need to go on the offensive. Stop defending. Start attacking. Make them prove their accusations. How? Call their bluff. Demand they produce this supposed wife. If she exists, she'll appear. If she doesn't, and she doesn't, they'll be exposed as liars. It was brilliant in its simplicity, and terrifying. That's a huge risk, Nathaniel said. If they've prepared for that, then you're no worse off than you are now. But if they haven't, you expose them as frauds and end this. The Dowager's eyes were sharp despite her weakened state. Your father was many terrible things, but he understood power, and power doesn't apologize, it attacks. That afternoon, Nathaniel penned a letter that would be published in every major newspaper in London. To those who claim I entered into an unlawful marriage, I challenge you to produce evidence. Not rumors, not gossip. Evidence. Present this supposed first wife. Produce the legitimate marriage certificate. Provide witnesses who attended this alleged ceremony. I will wait exactly 7 days. If no credible evidence appears, I will pursue legal action against every person who spread this slander, the Duke of Ashbourne. The letter was a gambit, but it shifted the narrative. Suddenly the burden of proof lay with his accusers. Lady Pemberton's drawing room was in chaos when she received a copy. He's bluffing. He must be. Lord Ashford, who had arrived to strategize, looked less certain. What if he's not? What if he truly knows we fabricated this? Then we produce the certificate, show it to the papers, to the courts. And when they examine it, when they realize it's a forgery, Ashford's composure was cracking. We'll be ruined, charged with fraud, possibly imprisoned. You said your nephew could make it undetectable. For casual inspection, yes, But if the courts bring in experts, if they examine the paper, the ink, the seals, Ashford stood pacing. This has gone too far. I wanted to embarrass him, not commit a criminal act. It's too late for cold feet now. We're committed. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. By the third day, cracks were showing in the accuser's ranks. Lord Ashford's nephew, terrified of prosecution, had quietly left London. Several of Lady Pemberton's allies had begun distancing themselves from the scandal, and then Mrs. Morrison delivered the evidence they needed. Your Graces, she entered the study with a packet of letters. Lord Ashford's personal correspondence. His own valet provided them. I think you'll find the third letter particularly interesting. Adriana read it aloud. To Lady Pemberton, the matter is arranged. My nephew assures me the certificate will be indistinguishable from authentic records. Once we present it, Hawthorne's reputation will be destroyed, and that insufferable wife of his will be revealed as the fraud she is. He signed it, Nathaniel said, stunned. He actually signed a letter confessing to forgery. Aristocratic arrogance, Mrs. Morrison said. He never imagined his own servant would betray him. Why did the valet give you this? Because Lord Ashford dismissed 3 servants last week without references. One of them was the valet's brother. The servant class has a long memory, Your Graces, and we protect our own. Adriana felt tears threatening. Thank you. Thank you for trusting us with this. You've earned that trust, Your Grace. You've treated us like people, not furniture. That kind of respect goes both ways. Armed with the letter, Nathaniel went directly to the magistrate. Within hours, warrants were issued for Lord Ashford and his nephew on charges of fraud and conspiracy. Lady Pemberton, who could not be directly tied to the forgery, faced social consequences that would prove equally devastating. The newspapers that had been so eager to spread the scandal now raced to report its unraveling. Duke exonerated, marriage certificate proven forgery. Lord Ashford arrested in scheme to destroy Hawthorne. But the real turning point came when Nathaniel and Adriana attended the opera that evening. They had debated whether to go, whether to face society so soon after the scandal. But the Dowager Duchess, from her sickbed, had been insistent. Show them you're united. Show them you're unafraid. Show them they failed. So they arrived at the opera house together, Adriana wearing her sapphires, Nathaniel's hand possessive on her waist. The crowd parted for them, whispers following their every step. They took their box, and Nathaniel made a deliberate choice. Instead of sitting beside Adriana with proper distance, he pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders, making their unity unmistakable. The ton watched with bated breath. Then Lord Marcus Fairfax entered his own box and immediately stood, beginning to applaud. For them. For their courage. Slowly, others joined. Not everyone, some of Lord Ashford's allies sat in stony silence, and Lady Pemberton's circle looked murderous. But enough people clapped to make it clear that the tide had turned. The Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne had survived. During the intermission, they were surrounded by well-wishers. People who had whispered behind fans now offered congratulations. People who had spread rumors now claimed they'd never believed them. It was hypocrisy of the highest order, but it was also victory. Lord Pembroke pulled Nathaniel aside. Well played, both of you. I've never seen the ton reverse course so quickly. We had help, Nathaniel acknowledged. Yes, your servant's network was brilliant. Who knew the real power in London operated below stairs? Adriana knew. She's been building those relationships for years. Pembroke smiled. Then your wife is smarter than both of us. Treasure her. I intend to. When they returned home that night, the Dowager Duchess was awake and insisting on hearing every detail. Adriana and Nathaniel sat on either side of her bed, recounting the evening like children reporting to a parent. You did well, the Dowager said when they finished. Both of you. You fought as partners. We learned from the best, Nathaniel said. His mother's expression softened. No, you learned from your mistakes. That takes more courage than learning from success. She looked at Adriana. I owe you a deeper apology than I gave. I judged you unfairly from the start. I saw your lower status and missed your greater character. You were protecting your son. I understand that now. Perhaps. But protection that wounds isn't protection. It's just control dressed in better clothes. The dowager's hand found Adriana's. I'm glad he has you. I'm glad you came back. So am I. Oh, later, in their shared bedroom, a space that now felt like theirs rather than his, Nathaniel pulled Adriana close. We did it, he said quietly. We actually survived. We did more than survive. We won. Because of you. Your relationships, your network, your intelligence. Because of us, she corrected. You stood up in that village. You published that challenge. You refused to let them break us apart. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. I love you. I should have said it every day for 3 years. I'll spend the next 30 making up for lost time. 30 years? She smiled against his mouth. Awfully confident. Hopeful. There's a difference. She pulled back slightly to look at him. Nathaniel, I need you to understand something. I forgive you for the distance, the coldness, the years of loneliness. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. We're building something new, not restoring something old. I know. And there will be days when the hurt resurfaces, when I remember how invisible I felt, when the scars ache. Then on those days, I'll remind you that you're seen now, always. I'll spend the rest of my life making certain you know you matter. She kissed him then, properly, deeply, with 3 years of longing finally allowed expression. And when they broke apart, both breathless, she smiled. Good, because I'm planning to be extremely demanding from now on. I certainly hope so. The following morning brought news that Lord Ashford had confessed fully, implicating Lady Pemberton in the scheme. Both faced ruin, Ashford through legal prosecution, Pemberton through social exile. Their attempt to destroy the Duke and Duchess of Ashbourne had instead destroyed themselves. But more importantly, it brought a visitor. Mrs. Beatrice Thornbury arrived at Ashbourne Manor in a flurry of energy and luggage, having decided London needed her supervision. I'm not letting you two muddle through this alone, she announced, sweeping into the entrance hall. Besides, Mr. Hartley's been properly chastened. Apparently someone in Parliament made inquiries about his business practices. Can't imagine who. Nathaniel and Adriana exchanged glances. Thank you, Adriana said, embracing her aunt. For everything, for giving me refuge, for believing in me. Nonsense, you saved yourself. I just provided the cottage. Beatrice looked around the grand entrance hall with undisguised interest. Though I must say, this is quite an upgrade from my little place. Is there tea? I'm gasping. As Mrs. Morrison led Beatrice to the drawing room, the Dowager Duchess appeared at the top of the stairs, having insisted on dressing and coming down despite her physician's protests. So you're the infamous aunt, she said, descending slowly. Beatrice looked up, unfazed by the Dowager's imposing presence. And you're the terrifying mother-in-law. We're going to have words about how you treated my niece. I look forward to it. The two formidable women sized each other up, and Adriana held her breath, uncertain whether they would clash or become allies. Then the Dowager smiled. You have spirit. I can see where Adriana gets her backbone. And you have taste. I can see where Nathaniel learned his dramatic flair. They both laughed, and the tension broke. Watching them, Nathaniel pulled Adriana close. We're going to be fine, he said. Yes, she agreed. I think we are. For the first time in their marriage, she believed it completely. The scandal had tested them. The accusations had tried to break them, but they had emerged stronger, united, and ready to face whatever came next, together. Together. The word carried more weight now than it had in 3 years of marriage. Adriana tested its shape in her mind as she stood at the window of their shared bedroom, watching London wake beneath a sky painted gold and pink. Behind her, Nathaniel still slept, his breathing deep and even, one hand stretched across the space where she had lain. Small intimacies. They were learning them slowly, carefully, like people who had been speaking different languages discovering they could finally understand each other. But understanding wasn't enough. Not yet. 3 weeks had passed since the scandal's collapse. Lord Ashford awaited trial. Lady Pemberton had retreated to her country estate in disgrace. The ton had moved on to fresher gossip, as it always did. On the surface, everything had returned to normal. Except normal had never been good enough. Adriana turned from the window to find Nathaniel awake, watching her with an expression she was still learning to read. Affection mixed with uncertainty, desire tempered by respect. "You're thinking too loudly," he said. "I can hear it from here." "Am I?" She crossed to the bed, sitting on its edge. "What am I thinking, then?" "That we've won the battle, but the war continues. That surviving a scandal doesn't fix 3 years of damage. That you're afraid to trust this." He reached for her hand. "Am I close?" "Too close." She laced her fingers through his. "What gave me away?" "The fact that I'm thinking the same things." He sat up, the morning light catching the silver starting to thread through his dark hair. "Adriana, I know we can't build a real marriage overnight, but I need to know what you need from me, specifically. Not pretty words or grand gestures, actual, concrete actions." The question was so direct it startled her into honesty. "I need to know I matter in the decisions that affect our lives, not just in theory, in practice." "Then let's practice." "What?" He stood, pulling on a dressing gown. "Come with me." She followed him downstairs to his study, where he pulled out ledgers, correspondence, and estate documents. "These are all the decisions I need to make this week. Tenant disputes in Yorkshire, investment opportunities in shipping, a request from Parliament for my support on agricultural reform. Let's go through them. Together. I want your opinion on everything." Adriana stared at the pile of documents. "You're serious?" "Completely. I meant what I said about partnership. Prove it to me that I meant it. Challenge my assumptions. Disagree with me. Make this real." So they sat at his desk, their desk now, and worked through each issue. At first, Adriana held back, offering safe opinions, testing whether he truly wanted her input or just wanted to appear to want it. But Nathaniel pushed back, demanded her real thoughts, and when she suggested an alternative to his Yorkshire tenant solution, he didn't just listen. He changed his plan to match her better idea. "The tenants need representation on the estate council," she argued. "Your steward means well, but he doesn't live their reality. Give them a voice in decisions that affect their lives." "That's radical. My mother would be appalled." "Your mother is beginning to come around. And more importantly, it's right." He studied the proposal she'd sketched out. "You're right. It is right. Let's implement it." "Just like that?" "Just like that. This is partnership, Adriana. It means your voice carries equal weight to mine." The simple statement cracked something open in her chest. For the first time, she began to believe they might actually build something real. The Dowager Duchess's health improved slowly, though the physician warned she would never fully recover. She held court from her sitting room, receiving visitors and orchestrating her return to society with the same strategic brilliance she'd once used to run her household. "I'm not dying in bed like some pathetic invalid," she announced one afternoon when Adriana brought her tea. "I'm dying in my best dress at the most important ball of the season, surrounded by people I've intimidated for 40 years. "You're not dying at all," Adriana said firmly. "You're too stubborn." Flattery, but the Dowager smiled. "Sit. Tell me how the partnership experiment is progressing." Adriana sat, cradling her own teacup. "It's terrifying." "Good. Anything worth having should be terrifying." "He actually listens. He changes his mind when I make better arguments. He's treating me like I have value beyond my title." "And this terrifies you because?" "Because I could get used to it. And if it's temporary, if he reverts to the cold Duke once the excitement of rebuilding wears off." Adriana set down her cup with trembling hands. "I don't think I could survive it a second time." The Dowager was quiet for a long moment. "My son's father was a monster in gentleman's clothing, charming in public, cruel in private. I survived by making myself untouchable, cold, invulnerable." Her voice softened. "I taught Nathaniel that emotional distance was safety. I was wrong. You were protecting yourself. I was perpetuating damage. There's a difference." She reached for Adriana's hand. "But I'm watching my son now, and I see something I never saw in his father. Remorse. Genuine remorse. The willingness to change. That's not performance, that's transformation." "How can you be certain?" "Because I know what performance looks like. I wore it like armor for 30 years. What Nathaniel's doing, that's vulnerability. And men like my husband, men like the man I feared my son would become, they don't do vulnerability. They do control. Adriana wanted desperately to believe her. What if I'm wrong to trust him? Then you'll survive it. You're stronger than you were 3 years ago, stronger than I ever was. The dowager squeezed her hand. But I don't think you're wrong. The test came sooner than anyone expected. A letter arrived from the Prime Minister requesting Nathaniel's immediate presence at an emergency Parliament session. A major vote on land reform was being pushed forward, and the outcome hung in the balance. Nathaniel's support could tip the scales. I have to go, he told Adriana, already pulling on his coat. This could affect thousands of tenant farmers across England. The reforms would protect them from exploitation, limit rent increases, guarantee basic standards. I'll come with you. He stopped. To Parliament? Yes. This affects our tenants too. I want to hear the arguments. Understand the opposition. If we're partners in managing the estates, I should be partners in understanding the policies that govern them. Adriana, women aren't allowed in the Parliament chambers. Then I'll wait in the gallery, or the hallway, or wherever wives are relegated. She met his eyes. But I'm coming. He could have argued, could have insisted it was improper or unnecessary. Instead, he smiled. Then let's go. They arrived at Parliament to find chaos. Lords shouted across the chamber, accusations flying, alliances shifting by the minute. The opposition, led by men who profited from exploiting their tenants, was fighting the reforms with every parliamentary trick available. Adriana sat in the visitors' gallery, one of only 3 women present, and watched Nathaniel navigate the political battlefield with skill that left her breathless. He spoke with passion about tenant rights, about human dignity, about the responsibility of privilege. We sit in these gilded chambers and debate abstractions, his voice rang out. But these reforms affect real people, families struggling to feed their children, farmers working land they'll never own, people who deserve security and basic fairness, not exploitation dressed up as economic necessity. Sentimentality, Lord Rutherford sneered. The free market determines fair rent. The free market is a fiction when one party holds all the power. Nathaniel cut him off. When a landlord can raise rents arbitrarily and tenants have no recourse, that's not economics. That's tyranny with a prettier name. The debate raged for hours. Adriana watched alliances form and break, saw Nathaniel gain supporters through logic and lose others to entrenched interests. The vote would be close, too close. Then, during a brief recess, inspiration struck. She found Nathaniel in the corridor, reviewing his notes with Lord Pembroke. I need to speak to Lord Cunningham. Both men looked at her in surprise. Cunningham? Nathaniel's brow furrowed. He's been neutral on this issue. Why? Because his daughter was presented at the same ball where we had our confrontation. I've been sending her books, corresponding with her about education. She's brilliant, Nathaniel, and frustrated that she can't attend university because she's female. I don't follow. Cunningham claims to be neutral, but he's philosophically opposed to any government interference in private property. He'll vote against the reforms unless we give him a reason not to. Adriana's mind raced. But he loves his daughter, and his daughter cares about fairness. Let me talk to her, now, before the vote. It was a gambit, a wild shot in the dark. But Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Pembroke, send for Miss Cunningham immediately. Tell her the Duchess of Ashbourne requests an urgent audience. 20 minutes later, Catherine Cunningham arrived, curious and cautious. Adriana met her in a private room, away from the political theater. Your Grace, your note said it was urgent? It is. Catherine, how many books have we exchanged in the past 6 months? The girl blinked at the unexpected question. 12? Perhaps 15? And in those books, we've discussed philosophy, justice, equality. You wrote to me last month about Mary Wollstonecraft's arguments for women's education. Do you remember what you said? That education is the foundation of all rights. That without it, any group remains subject to the tyranny of those who have it. Exactly. Adriana leaned forward. Catherine, in that chamber right now, powerful men are debating whether tenant farmers deserve basic protections. The same protections you and I take for granted. The right to fair treatment, to not be exploited, to have our voices heard. Your father is undecided on how to vote. understanding dawned in the girl's eyes. You want me to influence him. I want you to speak your conscience to him. Not for me, not for Nathaniel. For the principle we've discussed in every letter, that power without accountability is tyranny. Catherine stood, her young face determined. I'll speak to him now. 15 minutes before the vote, Lord Cunningham changed his position. In a brief but powerful speech, he cited his daughter's wisdom and his own belated recognition that property rights could not exist without human rights. My daughter reminded me that we are stewards, not kings, he said. The reforms before us don't threaten legitimate property ownership. They prevent its abuse. I vote in favor. The reforms passed by 3 votes. In the gallery, Adriana felt tears streaming down her face, not because of the political victory, though that mattered, but because Nathaniel had trusted her wild plan, had given her the space to try, had treated her political instincts as valuable as his own. Partnership in action. When they returned home that night, triumph and exhaustion mixing in equal measure, they found the Dowager Duchess waiting with news of her own. I've made a decision, she announced. I'm transferring the Dower House and its attached properties to Adriana. Legally, permanently, with full control. Adriana's mouth fell open. Your Grace, I can't. You can, and you will. I've watched you manage Nathaniel's estates with more skill than I ever showed. You deserve property of your own, real power, not borrowed authority. The Dowager's eyes were fierce. No woman should have to depend entirely on a man's goodwill, even a good man's. You need something that's yours alone. Mother, Nathaniel said quietly, that's incredibly generous. It's strategic. Adriana makes our family stronger. I'm ensuring she has the independence to keep making us stronger, regardless of what happens in your marriage. It was pragmatism dressed as affection, but Adriana understood the deeper gift. The Dowager was offering her security, safety, the knowledge that even if everything else fell apart, she would have something solid beneath her feet. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop looking over your shoulder, waiting for disaster. Say you'll trust that this is real. The following month, Adriana made her first major decision as an independent property owner. She converted the Dower House into a school for girls from tenant families, offering them the education that society denied them. The announcement caused a predictable scandal. The Duchess has gone mad, Lady Worthington declared at her salon. Educating farm girls. What's next? Teaching horses to read? But the opposition was weaker this time, the criticism less biting. Too many people remembered Lord Ashford's downfall, Lady Pemberton's exile. Too many had learned that attacking the Duchess of Ashbourne came with consequences. And Adriana had learned something too. She didn't need their approval. The school opened on a brilliant June morning. 15 girls aged 8 to 14 gathered in what had been a dowager's drawing room. Adriana stood before them, her heart pounding with nerves and excitement. You are here because you are brilliant, she told them. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you deserve the chance to become everything you're capable of being. Some people will tell you this education is wasted on girls who should be learning household management. They're wrong. You are not less than anyone else. You are the future. In the back of the room, Nathaniel watched his wife transform a radical idea into reality and felt something shift fundamentally in his understanding of love. It wasn't about possession or protection. It was about creating space for someone to become fully themselves. That evening, they walked the grounds of Ashbourne Manor together, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. I have something to tell you, Adriana said, her voice carrying a tremor of nervousness. Nathaniel's heart stopped. What is it? I'm pregnant. The world tilted, then righted itself in an entirely new configuration. You're certain? The physician confirmed it this morning. I'm due in February. He pulled her close, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. Are you happy about this? Terrified, she admitted. And yes, so happy I don't have words for it. We're going to be parents. We are. She pulled back to look at him. Nathaniel, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll raise this child in a house filled with honesty, where emotions aren't weaknesses, where partnership is modeled, not just preached. I promise. On everything I am, I promise. And promise me that if we have a daughter, you'll treat her like she can change the world. Because she can. That's an easy promise. I'm married to a woman who's changing it right now. The Dowager Duchess passed away in her sleep in late August, surrounded by family, her dignity intact to the very end. At her funeral, half of London turned out to pay respects to a woman who had terrified them and commanded their admiration in equal measure. But the Dowager's final gift came in her will. To Nathaniel, she left her blessing and her confidence that he had become a better man than his father ever was. To Adriana, she left a letter. My dear daughter, if you're reading this, I'm finally free of this troublesome body and on to whatever comes next. Good riddance. I have spent my entire adult life regretting my cowardice. I survived my marriage by becoming untouchable, but survival isn't living. I existed. You, my dear girl, live. You risk. You trust. You dare. I have watched you transform my son from a man hiding behind titles into someone brave enough to be vulnerable. That is the greatest gift you could have given this family. Raise your children to be fearless. Teach them that walls keep out pain but also joy. Show them that love is worth the risk of hurt. And remember that you were never the Duchess no one wanted. You were always the Duchess this family needed, even when we were too blind to see it. With the affection I should have shown you from the start, Eleanor Hawthorne. Adriana read the letter 3 times, tears falling on the expensive paper, before folding it carefully and placing it in the box where she kept her most precious things. February arrived with snow and hope. Adriana's labor lasted 16 hours, during which Nathaniel paced the corridor outside their bedroom like a man possessed. The physicians tried to send him away. It wasn't proper for husbands to be nearby during childbirth, but he refused to leave. If she's fighting, I'm staying within reach, he said flatly. Move me if you can. They didn't try. When the baby's first cry pierced the air, Nathaniel felt his knees weaken with relief. The physician emerged, smiling. Your Grace, you have a daughter. A daughter, a perfect, healthy daughter. They led him in to see Adriana, who lay exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. We have a daughter. I heard. He knelt beside the bed, afraid to touch either of them, afraid they might disappear if he tried. Is she... Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Adriana adjusted the blanket so he could see the baby's face. We're calling her Eleanor, after your mother. The name broke something in him, and suddenly he was crying too, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had created. Not just a child, though that would have been miracle enough, but a family built on truth and partnership and hard-won trust. Hello, Eleanor, he whispered to his daughter. I'm your father, and I promise you'll never wonder if you're loved. I promise you'll grow up knowing you can do anything. I promise I'll be better for you than my father was for me. Adriana's hand found his. We'll be better together. Yes, together. One year later, London society gathered for what had become the most anticipated event of the season, the annual Ashbourne Estate Summer Festival. What had started as a simple celebration for tenant families had evolved into something unprecedented. The grounds of Ashbourne Manor were open to everyone, aristocrats and farmers, servants and merchants, children from the Duchess's school, and lords from Parliament. Class distinctions blurred for one day as people gathered to celebrate community rather than hierarchy. Nathaniel stood on the terrace, watching the organized chaos with satisfaction. Below, he could see Adriana walking among the guests. Eleanor perched on her hip, stopping to speak with everyone from the Prime Minister to old Thomas Brennan from the tenant farms. Aunt Beatrice appeared at his elbow. Your wife has single-handedly revolutionized London society, you know. I know. Last year, people would have been appalled by this mixing of classes. Now they're fighting for invitations. Adriana has a way of making the impossible seem inevitable. She does. Beatrice studied him. You've changed too, you know. The man who married my niece would never have opened his estate like this. That man was a fool. Perhaps, but he was also human. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. She patted his arm. You chose growth over pride. That's not nothing. Below, Adriana caught sight of him and smiled, that radiant expression that still had the power to stop his heart. She said something to Eleanor, then pointed up at him. His daughter waved her chubby hand, and he waved back. Lord Marcus Fairfax joined him on the terrace. "Well, Hawthorne, I'd say you've successfully moved from most distant marriage in London to insufferably happy couple. How does it feel?" "Terrifying," Nathaniel admitted. "Every day I'm afraid I'll wake up and discover I've slipped back into old patterns, that I'll start taking her for granted again. And Adriana won't let me. She calls me on it immediately. We argue more now than we did in 3 years of polite distance." "That sounds healthy." "It is. It's messy and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary." He watched his wife laugh at something Mrs. Morrison was saying. "I thought love was supposed to be perfect. Turns out it's supposed to be real." As sunset approached, Nathaniel found Adriana by the lake, Eleanor asleep in her arms. He wrapped his arms around them both, and they stood in comfortable silence watching the light fade. "Do you remember the Harrington ball?" Adriana asked suddenly. "Where we met?" "Every detail. You were arguing with Lord Pemberton about agricultural subsidies, and I thought you were the most fascinating woman I'd ever seen. I was terrified. It was my first major ball, and I had no idea what I was doing. You were magnificent. I was young and stupid enough to believe in romantic love." She turned in his arms to look at him. "Then I married you and discovered that romantic love isn't enough. Real love is harder, messier, built on choice and work and trust that has to be earned every single day." "Regret marrying me?" "Never. Regret the 3 years we wasted, yes, but marrying you?" She kissed him softly. "Best decision I ever made, even when it was the hardest." "We should dance." "What?" "There's music. There's a perfect evening. We've barely danced since our wedding." He shifted Eleanor carefully to one arm and held out his other hand. "Dance with me, Adriana. Not because society expects it, because I want to." She took his hand and they swayed together at the lake's edge, their daughter sleeping between them, the sounds of celebration floating across the water. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I've said it before, but I'm going to keep saying it, every day, until you believe it completely." "I believe it now." "Then I'll say it until it becomes boring." She laughed. "That will never happen." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, Adriana. This is where I belong. With you. Always." Around them the festival continued. Music and laughter filled the air. Aristocrats and tenant farmers ate from the same tables. Children played together regardless of birth. The impossible had become ordinary, simply because two people had decided that love was worth fighting for. The Duchess, who had once been called unwanted, had transformed herself and her world through courage that looked like vulnerability, strength that manifested as honesty, and love that demanded she be seen. And the Duke, who had hidden behind walls, had learned that the greatest power came not from control, but from partnership, not from distance, but from proximity, not from fear, but from the terrifying courage to be fully, vulnerably human. They had survived scandal and betrayal, navigated heartbreak and hope, fought through pain to find something neither had quite believed possible. A marriage built on truth, a love forged in fire, a partnership that would reshape the very society that had tried to break them. The tongue would whisper about them for years to come. But the whispers had changed. They no longer spoke of the cold Duke and his invisible wife. They spoke of the partnership that changed everything, of the marriage that almost failed and instead became legendary, of love that proved itself not in perfect moments, but in choosing each other over and over, even when, especially when, it was hard. As darkness fell and stars emerged above Ashbourne Manor, Nathaniel and Adriana stood together at the edge of their transformed world, holding their daughter, surrounded by the life they had fought so hard to build. Together. Always together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.